Welcome back to my channel. I am Adorkable Rachel, and it is time once again for another episode of Rachel Reviews, where I review something that came out recently. And I know I have been releasing a lot of reviews lately. I promise not all my videos are gonna be reviews, but just bear with me because there's a lot of stuff coming out right now that I want to talk about. Well, some of you may or may not know that in the last 2 years, Toei Animation in Japan released a brand new Sailor Moon series. This was exciting news for me when it was announced because, you guessed it, I love Sailor Moon. The original was one of the first animes I ever watched as a kid, and it was a huge inspiration to a lot of kids in the 90s. Well, at least a lot of nerdy, maybe shy, girls, sometimes boys in the 90s. I mean, I don't know, some of us might have been so obsessed that we kept a lot of the merchandise and dolls that we bought when we were really into that show. Or we may or may not have ended up growing up and going to conventions and dressing up like our favorite characters. But I digress. When us fans found out that Toei Animation was going to reboot the really popular franchise, we of course got really excited, and just in time for the 20th anniversary. The original manga consists of 5 story arcs, and so far the new anime, which is officially dubbed as Pretty Guardian Sailor Moon Crystal, it only has consisted of the first 3 arcs, but we are anticipating that they're going to release the others later on. But as of right now, the 3 different arcs have been released in 3 different seasons. Since the first season, which a lot of people have dubbed the Dark Kingdom arc, was recently released on Blu-ray in the United States, that is what we are going to focus on today. I obviously don't own the actual Blu-ray set yet, but I have been watching the episodes on Hulu and Crunchyroll since they first came out, and they are still there today. So I feel like over the last 2 years I have had my fair share of being able to analyze and, get to know the show really well. So here we go. Here are my thoughts of the first season of the reboot of the very, very popular Sailor Moon franchise. Basic premise of Sailor Moon is that one day an ordinary girl named Usagi discovers that she is a superhero named Sailor Moon, and she also meets a lot of other Sailor Guardians who are powered by the planets of the solar system, such as Sailor Mercury, Sailor Mars, Sailor Jupiter, Sailor Venus, and it turns out they're all destined to rise up and battle against the evil Dark Kingdom, and to also find and protect the legendary Silver Crystal, which apparently in this universe is like the most powerful artifact in the cosmos, as well as prevent other villains from taking over the world and destroying the universe. Yes, it does sound like your stereotypical badass lady superhero fighting against evil kind of show, and one day I will go into more details in another episode about the show and why it was so popular and the metaphors and the whole Greek mythology and their powers and all that kind of stuff. But I am crunched on time, so today let's just focus on the first season. First, I should let you know that the original manga series consisted of chapters that were released monthly in magazines. There are 14 chapters in the first arc, therefore there are 14 episodes in this first season. This is actually different from the original anime that aired in the 90s because while that show did technically follow the original concept, it did take a lot of creative license and made a lot more subplots and also made a lot more storylines. The idea behind this was basically to draw out the show so that they could create a longer narrative. Anime nowadays doesn't seem to do that as much, but back then it wasn't that uncommon to do that with a really popular show. The new anime, on the other hand, it's just basically an animated version of the manga series, with each episode retelling a different chapter. This is something I'm honestly a little indifferent about. Reason for that being is that every chapter of the original manga was normally about 40 pages in length, sometimes longer, but when you do that, you're able to have a lot of space and time to actually tell a full chapter. But I realize that when you try to cram all of that story into a 22-minute episode, it can kind of make the narrative feel a little rushed at times. For example, sometimes they introduce a character just for the one chapter, and then it's kind of hard to care about them once they're gone forever, because really they didn't get that proper of an introduction. Comics and TV shows obviously have different languages, and yeah, it can be kind of weird when you just directly animate the original story. And you could make the argument that since the original anime was longer and more drawn out, that it actually gave you time to get to know the characters more. And then you also get to know the villains better, and therefore you feel more victorious once they're defeated, or maybe even you feel sad for them. And while I do understand that, for me also, I feel like that when you draw something out like that, there tends to be a lot of unnecessary filler, and that's definitely the case in that original anime. That said, if you're a big fan of the original manga, like I am, actually, it's really kind of cool to see the manga actually come to life on the big screen for the first time. And nowadays, actually, it is kind of hard to get people to get really invested in a really drawn out show because we kind of like things like, you know, more quick and to the point. So I personally think that going the shorter route was probably the smarter thing to do. We do still get appropriate introductions to the main characters, as you should in a first season, and we still get to watch them evolve and grow and become stronger superheroes. And I also personally find certain aspects of the show, for example, like the romance, to actually be a lot more believable in this version than in the older anime version. That said though, I do kind of agree though that they probably could have taken a little more creative license and changed things up, or, you know, taken some stuff out in order to just give the narrative a bit more of a flow, because like I said, cramming a lot of stuff in can really make that flow kind of not so good. I mean, come on guys, was it really that hard to just take a couple of creative liberties? If you grew up watching the show, like I did, it can obviously be kind of hard to not compare the two, but also, I think it's really interesting to watch them and see just how much anime has changed over the past 20 years. Both the original and the new anime, they are very much products of their times. The styles and the character designs of both, they really don't look like the original manga, but they do have very close representations of the styles that were and currently are popular. The animation is of course a lot more sharp and shiny, and yeah, that is to be expected when a show is, you know, 20 years older. But it also stems from the fact that the original show had 46 episodes in one season. Oh yeah, 46 episodes. And you thought Dragon Ball Z had long seasons. So there was actually a much lower budget per episode. The show was also a lot more cartoony back then. While the new series does follow the original source material more closely, and therefore it does have a bit more of a serious tone. If I had it my way, yes, I do think I would have liked it to have more silly and over-the-top moments, because really, the more serious tone has those few little silly moments, and because they're just kind of so far and few between, it makes them feel a little out of place at times. But you know what, all of that's not important unless this 14-episode season is able to stand on its own. So, of course, the big question here is this brand new series interesting enough to stand alone on its own? Well, here's the thing. Yes, some people have complained about some of the rubbery animation as well as the condensed stories in every episode. But the reason that this show shines for me personally is because I feel like some of the characters who didn't have a lot of attention in the last anime, for example, Tuxedo Mask. Some characters like him, they didn't really have a lot of focus on their identity, but now they actually seem like more fledged out characters and real people with personalities and motivations. I mean, sure, he had motivations and you knew his backstory in the original anime, but it didn't really ever seem like he was anything but eye candy. I mean, for the longest time, he would just save Sailor Moon, even though she was supposed to be able to take care of herself. But in this version, just like the manga, while he does kind of help save her at first, there is a much more clear focus on where he came from, and they do form a stronger, more closer connection earlier on. And I just don't feel like those traits were really that established in the original anime. And because of that, like I said, I really do believe in the romance in this version between Sailor Moon and Tuxedo Mask, or Usagi and Mamoru. I just feel like watching them get to know each other and get to meet and find out about each other, I just felt a much more sincere connection between the two. They find out about each other in the manga and in this version a lot sooner than they did in the original anime. And because of that, we see that even though Usagi is really flawed and weak at first in Crystal, I feel like both we and Mamoru actually watch her become a stronger heroine as the series goes on. And then they fall in love based on the battles and the growth that they go through together, rather than just having him save her constantly without actually knowing who she is. I guess I just got more invested because I actually got to watch them fight together as a team more in this version. And yes, there are other things about this show that do work, but I really did want to focus on the fact that that is why I really liked watching the show, is because I really do believe in the relationships between the characters. And to me, when you're watching just about any medium, whether it be a video game or a TV show, anime, movie, whatever, it really does boil down to the personalities, the motivations, and the relationships between the characters. That is the solid foundation of what makes something work. And yes, of course, an interesting story, but that all has to be melded into one. And to this show's credit, they at least do tell a straightforward narrative without too many complications, you know, unlike the other show, which had all these other weird themes per episode and made up all these unnecessary subplots. But that's the 90s for ya. I think it's important to remember that the problem is not in the source material. There was a reason that Sailor Moon is literally one of the most popular manga series ever. And this version does pretty much follow it to a T. This season may not be perfect, but there are things that work about it. And in fairness, the other seasons do get better later, but maybe we'll get to those later once they release those ones. If you are a fan of the original anime or the manga series and there are parts of the show that turn you off, I do understand, I really do. But I think it's important to remember that it's just another retelling of the franchise, and actually, it's a lot closer to the creator's original vision. In fact, from what I read, I think that Naoko Takeuchi had a lot more closer involvement with this show than the original, so it's actually kind of cool to see her personal influence play a bigger part in a TV show. I mean, when you think about the fact that the original anime was heavily produced by men and she didn't really have that much involvement in it, puts a lot of things into perspective. Can you say a lot of naked and upskirt action? In this day and age when a lot of TV shows are being revived and nostalgia is playing a big part in our media, I think that watching this show will definitely remind you of why you loved it so much when you were growing up. Even if it turns out it just reminds you that you like the other one better. But I still think that the music and the really interesting animation do epicify it a lot, and the voice acting is really good despite the lack of the original cast. However, I will say this, I personally grew up watching the American version and then soon after having access to the Japanese subtitled version, so it is actually really cool to see the original voice actress, Kotono Mitsuishi, who played the original Sailor Moon, is actually reprising the role in this version too, as only she possibly could. And you know what? Even if you didn't grow up watching the show, or if you're not an anime fan, you might still actually find this to be a pretty interesting and action-packed adventure story. I mean, it's only 14 episodes. I know it's not for everyone, but you know what? I've also seen that there's a lot of people who have watched this and they've been genuinely surprised by it. And even I will admit, Sailor Moon Crystal is in no way a super deep or thought-provoking anime, and in fact, neither is the entire franchise. But I still think that it's a compelling piece of work that's a part of something that really influenced a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. Sailor Moon was a story about a bunch of young, true to themselves, feministic women who were able to fight and kick ass, which in return inspired a lot of young girls around the world. And if this anime can at least do a good job in celebrating the legacy that is Sailor Moon, which it does, then really that's all I can ask for. And it also ended up creating a lot of new fans, and it brought back a lot of wonderful memories for people like me, so you know what? I'm a happy Rachel. And yes, I am aware that there were some shots in the original that were kind of animated poorly, but thankfully they did fix those in the Blu-ray version. So those are my thoughts on the brand new season of the Sailor Moon Crystal anime series. Now, my question this time around is, have you seen Sailor Moon Crystal? And if so, what do you think? Go ahead and leave your comments below. Be sure to like and share. And if you like what you saw here, then be sure to hit that subscribe button. And as always, please be sure to keep checking back for more Adorkable videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. And if you don't check back, in the name of the moon, I will punish you. Wait, did anyone ever notice that she was saying I love you in sign language? Aw, that's so sweet. Bye, Adorkabuddies. Love and beauty shock. Bye.